Hello, and welcome to Ask Lovecraft After Dark. We are so excited tonight to have for you on the show author Christa Carmen. Christa, welcome.
Thank you for having me.
I got to know about Christa through just the general wonderful world of social media and began immediately finding all of her work all over in numerous collections and numerous publications, magazines. And then I found out that she had sort of a collection of short stories that came out last year, Something Borrowed, Something Blood-Soaked, which was an incredibly evocative title. And I knew that she would have a lot to tell us on tonight's episode. So Christa, welcome. And tell us about this collection of yours.
Yeah, so it's published through Unnerving, and I had published a short story with Unnerving in their magazine in, I believe, January of 2017. And I really enjoyed the experience and really liked working with the publisher, Eddie Generous. And I didn't really have a plan to put out a collection, but when I saw he had a call for submissions, I said, you know what, I'm going to take a look at what I have and see if I can put together something cool. And once I started to do that, I saw that I had quite a few things that, ran along the same themes, and I could do a whole bunch of different cool subgenres. So I put the collection together and got accepted for publication, and it's been really great since then. It has had I've gotten some good feedback on it, so that's great.
Fantastic. Now, were you thinking specifically sort of matrimonially as you were going through writing this, or was that just sort of a happy coincidence?
Yeah, so I think there were quite a few stories that hit along that through line. There was like a running addiction theme, a running marriage theme. There were a couple of things that definitely reared their heads throughout some of my stories. So I just sort of went with it and tried to place them in some cool order where like some of them are more positive and some of them are a little more sinister. So yeah.
Tell us about the titular title and why you sort of chose that to kind of be the first thing people see in this story.
Yeah, so it's actually one of the shorter stories in the collection. Something Borrowed, Something Blood-Soaked is more of a flash fiction piece. It was originally published by Fireside Fiction for a Halloween showcase. And I probably wouldn't have picked, I went in thinking like, let me look for something longer that like maybe my favorite story. But that title just seemed to sort of encompass everything. It was like a little of this, a little of that, something borrowed, something blood-soaked, something gothic, something slapstick horror. I just felt like the horror tropes that are within, the 13 stories are kind of all over the map. So I figured Something Borrowed, Something Blood-Soaked was just a kind of cool way to play with that.
And is horror the genre that you've always sort of been most drawn towards, or have you found that you've kind of bounced around in different iterations and then just sort of made your way here over time?
It's always been what I think like when I first started writing, just in general, I didn't really know what I was doing. And I wrote a lot of like sort of memoir, nonfiction, journaling type things. And then when I really sat down and was like, oh, I'm going to write like an actual story or some novel chapters. I mean, just the initial things that came out were like gothic horror, psychological horror. It's always been the stuff I've loved to read the most. It's always been the stuff I've loved to watch the most. It's funny that you asked me that too, because I was just thinking the other day that like, it is still kind of weird that like I call myself a horror writer. I do kind of, I was thinking like, maybe I would just start calling myself a writer, because I don't think that the horror aspect of it, I don't think that should really, I mean, I'm a writer. I don't think that should be the defining thing, because I do feel like so much of horror is universal, and whether or not people want to admit it, it is the truth. So I don't know. I was thinking a lot about that lately.
No, I definitely can see that. I mean, I really discovered horror through Blockbuster, right? Through, seeing it as just one of the genres, the shelf talkers. And, horror for such a long time for me represented this kind of catch-all genre where you had elements of fantasy and sci-fi and drama and romance and comedy. Like everything could have a place in the horror world. So that absolutely makes sense that, we look at horror and it does seem to be able to fit whatever you need.
Yeah, definitely. I actually did an exercise recently where I tried to write something. Like, I had an idea for a story and I wrote the story, and then I was like, what would this look like if it wasn't horror? Like, what would this look like if I was trying to write like a, you know, quintessential New Yorker literary piece? And I don't even think that I can explore the things that I want to explore as well outside of the genre of horror. So, I mean, whether or not I go forward and start to like maybe describe myself in a broader sense and just say I'm a writer instead of I'm a horror writer, I definitely just I write horror and I love to play in that sphere.
You mentioned horror films, and I do have to ask because it jumped out in a previous interview. Um, you were traumatized by the Leprechaun movie. Is that correct?
Yes. Yes.
Now, was this the original Jennifer Aniston, or is this Lep in the Hood, or my personal favorite, Leprechaun in Space? Which Leprechaun in particular hurt you?
It was the original Leprechaun. It was the Jennifer Aniston Leprechaun. Also, like, surely rented from Blockbuster. Yeah, I was like in third grade, and that was like the sleepover movie of choice for a bunch of third grade girls. It strikes me as like I kind of thought it was strange back then, but now looking back, I'm like, so weird. Yeah, it was Leprechaun and Nightmare on Elm Street 3. It was a double
Oh,
feature
dang.
of
Oh,
those
wow.
two.
So this friend of yours was really like going all in that night.
Yeah, yeah. And I didn't touch or look at or go for horror for a while after that. And then when I was about I did like to read it, though. I feel like maybe there was still some an element of control there where, like, you could turn the pages and the horror for young adults at that point was the Bunnicula series and Fear Street and Goosebumps, and it was definitely not as horrific as a third grader watching Nightmare on Elm Street 3. But when I was 13, I saw the John Carpenter's Halloween, and I was like, oh, this is actually awesome. I don't hate this, so this is great. I'm going to go forward with liking this now.
Have you been able to watch a Warwick Davis movie since then?
So, a few years ago, my husband and I, we used to get caught up in, like, we don't really buy DVDs anymore just because you buy them on iTunes or whatever. But we bought, like, I think we got caught up in the, like, ooh, look at the shiny DVD covers and all the horror films in this Walmart bin. And we bought, like, all of the Leprechauns, and we were gonna, like,
Oh, dang.
we were gonna try to watch them all, but I don't think we got through, like, the first one. I was like, oh, this is not as scary as I remember it, but it's way more terrible. So
The first two Leprechauns, I will full on admit that, like, I love the Leprechaun series, but like the first two are pretty terrible. Leprechaun in Space is like that will forever hold like a piece of my heart. I think I have the VHS of it floating around here somewhere. But yeah, that it's not a good series. I don't proclaim my love for Leprechaun out of any sense of bravery or wanting to discuss my taste at all. But it is weird, like, how those sort of movies you see early on can, like, imprint on you in very strange ways. Like, my early childhood movies are things like Doctor Strangelove and Name of the Rose and the Godzilla 1985, and I have no idea what that did to my, like, young developing brain.
yes. Weirdly, like, the one thing that I remembered something so vividly from the Nightmare on Elm Street 3 one. It was like one of the characters in it was walking to her death in, like, the dream sequence, unable to control herself because she's being controlled by Freddy through dreams. And, like, it was so silly and stupid and not all that scary compared to all the other things that my poor little third grade eyes were witnessing. But it was just like the blood spattering the floor, like, as she walked. Like, for some reason it stuck in my brain so long, and I always remembered, like, something about that scene being so terrifying. And then I actually watched it years later, and I was like, I almost didn't even notice it or catch it. I was like, oh, this thing that traumatized me as a child is like, it's not even like a blip on the horror lover radar now.
And you definitely are a horror lover. I don't know a lot of folks who have managed to successfully create a thrilling short story that is also an homage to Bruce Campbell.
Yes, that was probably still to this day one of my most enjoyable stories to write. It just was so fun, and people seemed to enjoy it, which was great.
Was that just kind of written as a sort of love letter, or did you were you kind of looking at the sort of the horror cinematic world and figured, no, Bruce Campbell, there's some action there I can play with?
So I love Bruce Campbell, and I love The Evil Dead, and I love the Ash versus Evil Dead that came out on Stars, and like so many of my stories, a lot of them at least start with like some kernel of real world, whatever, be it an experience, an image, an event, a feeling that's personal to me. And some of the things in that story like really did happen. Like I had a friend down the street from me whose house was broken into, and my husband did work second shift at the time. And like he, left one evening, and I was just sort of laying in bed, like, what would I do? And then it was sort of like, what would Bruce Campbell do is the more interesting question. And what would I do if I were channeling Bruce Campbell? That's the most interesting question of all. And one of the things that I loved so much about the Ash versus Evil Dead series was I loved the character of Kelly, because she's just such a badass, and she's basically female Ash. So I was like, I'm gonna write my own female Ash. And yeah, just it was fun to, and I don't think I wrote it ever expecting it to go anywhere. Like I was like, probably nobody will ever want to publish this. But it got published by like a small e-zine, and then ended up in like a Year's Best Hardcore Horror anthology. So I was like, well, this is awesome that people enjoyed it.
Well, even then Bruce Campbell give it some sugar. Didn't he help promote it a little?
Yes, he did retweet it, and then I forgot too. It got reprinted again on the Chilling Tales for Dark Nights podcast. And when I tweeted that out, Dana DiLorenzo, who plays Kelly Maxwell, she retweeted it, and I was like, I have made it! Like, this is great. So that was pretty awesome.
That is fantastic. Is pop culture something you explore in much of your work, or was this kind of a one-off?
I think I do explore it fairly often. I think I'm kind of either completely one way or the other. Like something is either very much in my head and coming from a place of like wanting to explore something psychological or like a fear, and I'm not even thinking about something like cinema or pop culture. But when I am thinking of those things, I'm kind of going at it and embracing it 100%. I know we're probably going to get to this, but I do have a story coming out in an anthology that's all gothic cinema horror inspired stories. So I like leaned into that whole thing hard when I wrote that story, and it's very much like Hammer horror inspired and the like Universal monster era kind of thing. So yeah, that was fun to write too.
Did you have to do a lot of additional research for that, or were your viewing habits already geared in that direction?
They were. It had been a while though, so I definitely like forced my husband to have like an old, black and white horror movie night, and I think pretty sure he fell asleep, but I watched a couple. I don't think I sat there and watched the whole movie, but I watched some scenes out of. I fell down the Amazon Prime rabbit hole of just clicking through some of the older films. It was fun. I enjoyed it.
Now, pivoting a little, I know that you have a background working in both addiction and mental health recovery, and you've talked about the sort of the psychology of these stories. Given how mental health is portrayed in horror in particular, usually badly, how have you managed to sort of reconcile that, right? With the sort of the tropes of horror, where, someone sees something monstrous and goes, unbelievably mad, or, like experiences a trauma and becomes a serial killer. How do you reconcile or deal with that, given the fact that, this is your work? You see the sort of the real uncinematic side of things.
Yeah, I think, so Gordon White from Hell Notes. He had interviewed me when my collection came out, and he asked me a question that really struck home for me and really sort of made me see my own work and the things that I had done in my own work in a new light. And he said that I portrayed, like the addicts in my story, for example, as both the heroes and the anti-heroes and the literal monsters. Like in each story has kind of like a different take on some of the same themes. And I I I want to say, like, I kind of sound like I'm backtracking here. Like, oh yeah, I did do that consciously, even though I didn't really know. But like, I think because I have such a background in mental health and substance abuse, and I'm in recovery myself, so I've like seen a lot of things firsthand. I sort of just know that there's no black and white to any aspect of it. And so I think that definitely came out in writing the stories, just that you can't portray any aspect of mental health or substance abuse in any black and white terms. Like it's the people or what they're going through or the treatment. Every aspect of it sort of has a whole gamut of things to explore and to analyze. And I certainly didn't cover all the bases even close, but I am happy that out of the collection, the stories sort of explore the good, the bad, the ugly, the gray areas in between all of the I've and it's hard too, because a lot of those stereotypes, I mean, a lot of them are still kind of enjoyable to lose yourself in. Like it's a trap sometimes to want to say, oh, I can just explain this person's, desire to kill somebody because they're, have a mental health issue. And it's like, well, I think some of the more interesting stories and novels are the ones that start with that desire to explore something from that sense, but then go further with it and take it to the next level and say, no, how can I do this differently and do it justice? So hopefully I did that at least a little bit.
Do you find you still have to push back against a lot of stigma within the genre, or by now have like things progressed a little better?
Yeah, I think it's been, I think we're definitely seeing some of that stigma removed. Like the Hereditary film, that was something where halfway through I started to get really angry because I thought I knew where it was going. And I was like, oh, here we go. Like, this is not something that we've all seen a million times, but then they took it to that next level. So yeah, I think the stigma is being broken down. And, I will say this, I try not to get caught up in reviews or, even, it is the first collection I put out. I won't lie. Like I've read most of the reviews that are, it's interesting. And I do have, thick skin where I'm more just interested in what people, even the negative things that people have to say. But I only think I saw one review of the collection that was sort of like, there's so many addiction stories. Do we really, kind of like, is that really, do all these addicts sort of warrant all these different stories? Like, could we get maybe one addiction story? And to me, that was like the only thing, of course I didn't, but that was one of the only things I really found myself like kind of wanting to push back on. Cause I was like, yes, that's sort of like the really interesting thing about addiction and mental. I'm just going to put my phone on the charger.
Well, it's also not like we're in a particular moment in American history where addiction is, a major part of the conversation about what's happening nationally.
Right. So it's just, you can hear me, right?
Oh, yes.
It's just like, to me, it was like everyone's story is different. Just because it's an addiction story does not mean it's supposed to be the same. So yeah, I'm hoping to even continue to explore that more. I hadn't written anything that was in the mental health addiction scope in a while, and then I sort of pumped out this 10,000 word, I don't really know what it is, like kind of a short story, kind of a novella, this past December, and I haven't really done anything with it yet, but I felt myself kind of like longing to return to that again. I was like, yeah, I think it's time to kind of go into that realm again and see if I can come up with something new.
Fantastic. Now I know you're based out of Rhode Island, which of course is very close to our heart here and the Ask Lovecraft world. Uh, does any of that bleed into your work? I mean, Rhode Island, of course, is famous for Lovecraft, but like that, you know, it also just has its own sort of haunted air. Do you find that that's something that you're able to lean into, or are you kind of sort of done with the spooky Rhode Island sort of stereotype?
No, I'm not done with it. I think this is totally a cool, creepy place. When I first moved back here, I went to college in Philadelphia and I lived in LA for a bit, and then I lived in Boston for 6 years. And I hadn't really expected to end up back in my hometown. And I once I embraced like there's a pretty great writing community in Westerly of all places, and great bookstores and conventions, and just there's a lot of great just writing and reading resources in the state. But then I started to really lean into just like the creepiness and the I love how at present we're about to go into August, the town and pretty much the state, it's full of tourists and traffic, and everything is about the beach. And I enjoy that because it makes the dark times, like winter kind of sucks. I will admit, I get to the point where I'm like, I'm sick of the snow. I'm sick of putting on a coat to even take the dog out to go to the bathroom. But I like that we get these sunny months, and that, the town is full of people, and then everyone leaves. And I love to go down to, like Watch Hill, where Taylor Swift has a $17 million home on the coastline. Like, there are people lining up to take pictures in front of her stupid "I knew you were trouble when you walked in, no trespassing" sign. But if you go down there in the winter, it's awesome. There's nobody around. There's like coyotes roaming the lands, like the ocean house that's like a, huge tourist attraction in the summer is like, there's talk of, ghosts in the ocean house, and you can totally see why those stories have been, passed along. Um, there's vampire legends and haunted abandoned schools and famous cemeteries, and that's not even looking at Providence and the Lovecraft aspect of things. So for the smallest state in the country, I think we have a lot going on for the horror genre.
You punch well above your weight.
Definitely.
And you're going to be headed out to Necronomicon not too long. Tell us what's bringing you there.
Yes, I will be at Necronomicon. I just got the schedule yesterday. I'm going to be on 2 panels, one on Friday about Hoffman and his contribution to horror and his connection to Poe and Kafka and Lovecraft, of course, and Hitchcock as well, which I thought was a cool connection. So I'm excited about that one. And then a panel on Sunday about Lovecraft's dream cycle stories. So that's exciting.
Oh, that is exciting. What are you going to tell folks about K-Death?
I I've read everything the Lovecraft has written, but I haven't reread anything in a while. So I would love to sit and reread it, because I have this gorgeous Lovecraft anthology, like annotated book that I just love to sit.
Oh, the massive Leslie Klinger like doorstop.
Yes, yes. But I was trying to be realistic and like know that I'm pretty busy over the next few weeks. So I actually found a great Audible collection of the Dream Cycle stories. So I was going to give them a re-listen, and yeah, come up with some good stuff to say.
Fantastic. Well, what can folks look forward to coming out in the next little while?
Yeah, so an anthology that's going to be debuting at Necronomicon. It's called Behold the Undead of Dracula, Lurid Tales of Gothic Cinematic Horror, which is quite the mouthful, but it's awesome. There's some really great authors in it, and I have a story in there as well, and that, like I said, will be debuting at Necronomicon, so that'll be available there. I have another really cool anthology that I still don't think I'm allowed to say anything about, but I'm really excited
Ooh.
for. I think I can just say it's for younger horror readers, and it's like a graphic novel illustrated kind of thing. So I'm really excited about that. That's just in a couple months, but I don't think I could say anything else yet. And then I also have an anthology a little bit later, but through Rooster Republic, Strange House Press, Not All Monsters, edited by now Bram Stoker award-winning Sarah Tantlinger. So I have a story in that one as well.
Fantastic. And if folks want to follow you online, where's the best place they can go?
My website has links to everything, so that's probably the easiest place. It's just www.christacarmen.com. And there's links to Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and any of my stories that are available online, as well as links to anthologies that you can purchase.
Well, fantastic. Christa, thank you so much for coming on the show. Thanks for everyone watching. This has been Ask Lovecraft After Dark. I'm Lehman Kessler. If you've enjoyed this program, you can watch our main program, Ask Lovecraft, 3 times a week over at asklovecraft.com. I'm just getting back from doing a live show in Santa Fe, so if I seem a little addled by sun and altitude, that's why. You can find out about other live shows and about other things that are happening at lehmankessler.com. If you want to just watch me scream into the void, you can follow me on Twitter at Lehman Kessler. And if you enjoyed this program and you want to help keep us on the air, you can go to patreon.com/asklovecraft. Thank you so much again, Christa, and we look forward to seeing more of your work out there. Have a blast at Necronomicon.
Thank you very much again for having me.
All right, everyone. Have a great night. Bye.